guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And this is No Limits, a mid-trap podcast. So how you doing today, Mike?
Dude, I'm good. I fired up my pizza oven last night, so I had some leftover pizza all day today. I'm in a good mood.
That's the best. that's good.
How about you? What's going on?
Yeah, nothing. We carved a pumpkin tonight. That was pretty fun.
That came out good.
Yeah, thanks. I'll share it on my Instagram for people to see.
Nice.
It was, yeah, it's getting cold here, so I think we're supposed to have snow tomorrow, so that's kind of sad.
Yeah, it's crazy that time of year is coming this quickly.
Wah, 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 but yeah. My golf course officially closed.
Oh, whatever are you going to do?
I got one last round in yesterday. I was so happy.
Goodness.
It was like 55 degrees. My buddy texted me. It was like, let's go. So we got to get it in.
You got to get it in.
We got it in.
Nice. Nice. All right.
I think I played 45 rounds this year.
Jesus. Nine holes, right?
Not all 18.
Okay.
Probably half of them are 18, half of them are 9.
It's a lot of golf.
Way too much. The quality of golf, it peaked
and then
it declined.
Yeah, I know about that. I play better when I'm coming off a rest. Like I haven't played in 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know. I just play better. And then if I've been playing a couple times in a row, I trail off. Maybe it gets in your head. I don't know.
No, I think people you just start thinking about it.
You think too much. Yeah.
Think too much. Yeah. So,
well, something I thought about a lot is this podcast.
Me too. I've been reading Executive Power. I'm excited for this one. So
yeah, over the next couple of weeks, we will be reading and reviewing Executive Power. But today, we are bringing to you our author series with a special guest, Mike Trott, author of The Protected. Before we get there, this month is November. Veterans Day is coming. And I don't know about you, Chris, but I was excited that we released our special announcement just a few days ago about how we're going to give back.
Yeah. Veterans Day rolled around. We decided when we started this podcast, we were going to pick a foundation to donate to. We picked the Prostate Cancer Foundation. We hope you enjoy the interview with Rebecca that we dropped this weekend. If you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to go listen to it. It was very informative. The work that they do is great to help not only end prostate cancer, but also their partnership with the VA, bringing cutting-edge treatment, to veterans was really great. It was really to just talk to her and learn more about that. So, we mentioned it yesterday. We'll mention it again here, but, we're going to donate all of our Patreon funds for the next 2 months to the PCF. Hopefully, help fund the research to end prostate cancer. So,
yep. Really excited. So if you haven't checked out that special announcement episode, please go do so. And then you can visit our website, mitrappod.com. Look for the orange Support Us on Patreon button. And if you've been on the fence, not sure if you want to sign up and help out, this is the time. Because 100% of 2 months' worth of your pledges will be donated to the cause. And we'll send you some sweet Mitrap Pod stickers and a couple bookmarks. And speaking of patrons, it's time for our October book giveaway.
Yay.
All right. So I've got all the names of any patron who signed up and was with us, even beforehand, stuck with us through October. And I've got them in the Wheel of Names website. Shall I spin that wheel?
Spin it.
Here we go.
Drum roll, please.
Hey, it's good friend of the podcast, Dawn. It is Dawn.
Sweet. Nice.
Yes, I'm excited about that one. It was a real treat to talk to her. What was that, a couple of months ago now?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
A month ago.
Yes. Well, we have to do another patron hangout, so. Yeah,
we do.
Maybe we'll see who signs up in November. We'll do a little celebration, get all our patrons together on a quick video chat to talk about rap, spitball about rap.
Yeah. Rap on rap, baby.
Well, Dawn, we'll be reaching out to you, and you'll get to pick a signed copy by Vince Flynn of Executive Power, Extreme Measures, Pursuit of Honor, Act of Treason, or Protect and Defend. And if you'd like, also a copy of The Survivor by Kyle Mills. So any one of those that you want, you can pick, and we will send it out. Thank you for being a patron.
Right.
All right.
That's great.
All right. Well, let's get to the interview with Mike. And as you might have heard last episode, he wrote a book called The Protected. So we're getting into a little bit of nonfiction where he talks about his decades worth of experience in the world of executive protections. And his primary role was protecting the DCI. So he talks a little bit about his experiences in the field. Now, Chris, one thing the listeners are going to hear in the interview is this story. Can you tell me which scene it makes you think of? It's not a perfect one-to-one analogy, but Mike shared in West Berlin in the 70s and 80s, and he had a protectee. And the local police raided a home of suspected extremist in the Red Army faction and found a hit list. And his protectee was on the hit list, along with the name of a very high-profile German banker named Alfred Herrhausen. And this German banker was on the hit list. He was an advisor to the chancellor. He was on the management board of Deutsche Bank. So he was funding some high-level political things. And the Red Army faction assassinated him with an IED and a roadside bomb. And Mike was like, whoa, this job is for real now, because his protectee was also on the same list. And they were kind of blindsided. Yeah. What does it make you think? A German banker, involved in political dealings?
German banker, assassinations, got to be the third option, Count Hagemüller.
Count Hagemüller, there it is. He then told me about this one. He was recounting a story he wasn't exactly involved in, but it involved a satchel bomb on a bicycle. And what blew my mind was, he said, why it was important in the world of protection was the bicycle was able to get inside the motorcade and deliberately pass the first car. Well, it was going past the first car because he knew the target was in one of the later cars in the motorcade. On a bicycle, he was able to go right up to the second car, throw a satchel on top of the car, or at least detonate it in the location of the vehicle. And I'm thinking of what scene?
Oh, that's term limits with who do they bomb? The senator from,
is it Minnesota where the O'Rourke's were from?
Why am I blanking?
I forget the name.
Anyways,
I can't remember the name. But he was good friends with
Seamus
Olson.
Senator Olson.
Senator Olson. Yep.
Yeah.
And am I right? They left the restaurant where Seamus and Michael had lunch with him.
Mm-hmm.
They turn the corner and they see his car going by,
and a motorcycle.
And a motorcycle comes up. Yep.
Yeah.
Drops a satchel right there on the roof and hit the target. Well, yeah. Anyway, Mike shared with me a lot about stories such as that he's been through and things to look out for when he's designing a protection detail. And most importantly, he's a Mitch Rapp fan.
Nice.
So we talk a little bit about his favorite books. All right. Well, I hope you enjoy this episode in our author series. All right. Today we welcome a special guest. Michael Trott is the author of The Protected, an informative and strategic view inside the world of executive protection. The book has been praised by many experts inside the world of security, intelligence, and law enforcement, including George Tenet, former director of the CIA, who claimed, "In The Protected, Mike provides valuable insights and intelligent perspectives into the world of personal protection." So, Michael, thanks for joining us today and coming on Mitch Rapp Podcast.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great. So first and most important question, have you read any of the Vince Flynn novels? You are familiar with our operator, Mitch Rapp, no?
I don't think you can be in this industry and not be familiar with Rapp. It's probably not possible. I think Separation of Power and American Assassins are two books that I can remember the most. But as I referenced before, I read a lot on planes, so it's not something I have a lot of free time to do these days. But definitely very familiar with the character for sure.
Sure. All right. Well, can you start telling us about your career and how you came to be one of the foremost professionals in the world in the field of executive protection? How did that become your domain?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that that comment. It is a very crowded field, and I'm very respectful of all those who serve in this particular industry. There's thousands that come before me, and there's thousands with me now, and thousands after. So But with that said, I kind of mentioned in the book that you come by this industry either by uh, previous knowledge, maybe it's Secret Service or it's a special agent with another organization, and you have your sights on it as a young kid, maybe, and you head in that direction. And then sometimes the profession chooses you. You find yourself in a situation where an opportunity exists, or maybe a mentor brings you into this organization or this particular skill. That's kind of what happened with me. Um, I had ever desired really to join the Army. I had more of a mindset of special forces in the Army. That's the direction I wanted to go. And ironically, I was going to join the service right out of high school with 4 or 5 good friends on a buddy program. And when I went to the recruiter to sign up, I was the only one there. And so my friends bailed out on me on that particular day. I remember calling my dad. I'm like, hey, everybody bailed out on me. I think I'm going to go ahead and join the Army solo. And he was a former Army guy himself. He served in the Korean War, and he always tried to convince me to go Navy or Air Force. So I took some time to think about it, and actually, a couple of years later, I joined the Air Force. But I wanted to do something still similar in the special ops world, and ended up going into the security profession in the Air Force, and kind of continued down that path and served for about 10 years. And 6 of those years were in Germany. And I think the significant part of that aspect of that time period was serving during the before and after the Berlin Wall fell down. So, knocked down, if you will. So during that particular time period, it was a very interesting time in history for sure, and serving in Germany. But I got selected and ended up working executive protection, close protection for a high-profile general who was under threat of the Red Army faction, a terrorist organization at that time. So that would be my first opportunity to get involved with that particular area, protecting somebody else. I was a special weapons instructor, special weapons and tactics instructor, close protection specialist, a driver, and just kind of getting into those special skills as a 24, 25-year-old young airman, if you will. Spent a lot of time at the Army training, sort of rounding out their skill sets. And then after 10 years, I had an Air Force mentor who was a senior officer who also worked for the CIA at a particular time, as well as the DIA. And he took me under his wing, and when I got to that 10-year point, he was like, you got to make a decision if you're going to continue in the military towards retirement, but if you're not, let's talk about the intelligence organization. So he kind of steered me that path, and as I jokingly, make a comment to other individuals, he set me up with had a coffee with an individual who was sort of a recruiter for the CIA, and next thing you know, 11 months later, I'm working for the CIA.
Can only imagine what that time period was like, just getting your feet wet in the intelligence business. But your experience in all those other branches must have helped. So thank you for your service in all these different capacities.
Absolutely.
So thinking more about the actual skills that are required in the field of protection, can you tell us what is the most valuable asset for someone to bring to the table? Because we have a misconception, I believe, a lot of lay people, not involved in the field or in the military, based on media. So can you tell us what the real skill sets are that are required, and how maybe it doesn't or does match up with what you see in popular media from movies and Hollywood? And do they get it wrong is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. I think what I can appreciate with the Mitch Rapp series is the character plays a lot on his mental fortitude, his ability to think quickly on his feet, and have a lot of tools in the toolbox, as we say. Close protection is not all guns. It's not all knife fighting. It's not all, close combat. It's a lot of finesse. It's a lot about knowing and sort of being able to have that sixth sense, I think. If you're truly in the business of close protection in high threat areas, or an individual who has a substantial threat, it's for real. There's no games with that. Just recently, the chief of police in Mexico City was basically an attempted assassination on him, and as it appears, at least based on the reports so far, the two close protection agents that were assigned to him literally saved his life. They died in the process, but they sort of jumped over the seats and covered him with their body as the penetration of the rounds of the armor protection began to penetrate the vehicle, and these rounds penetrated the officers, or the protection officers. So it is a serious business, depending on who you're protecting. So with that said, yes, there's a lot of training that goes into it, and I think sometimes the misconception might be, or perception is that we have a lot of tools that sometimes you read in the books that it's a little far-fetched. Some of the movies we see where whether it's one of the teams that are being shot at by 30, 40 people in rounds within 30, 40 yards and nobody gets hit. That's just not what it is. It's exciting maybe, and it keeps the character alive longer, but it's just not realistic. But with that said, a lot of training is important. So a lot of tools. You're developing tools about what we call the concepts and principles of close protection, kind of where to stand, where to be, where not to be when we're escorting an individual. Prior to an individual going into a location, it's important we call it in advance. We want to know, we want to take away all the mysteries of where. Let's take the CIA director, since we're talking about sort of Mitch and Stansfield and these whole characters. Before these individuals go to a location that might be a high risk, we want to take away all the mysteries. We want to own that area if and when we can. So you take a methodical approach to the movements. Arrivals and departures are always our scariest times with executive protection. Because those are areas we often don't get to control. We don't like taking a principal out of a secure, safe environment and take them to a meeting at a hotel, as an example. We can't control that hotel unless we're Secret Service and we have hundreds or thousands of agents and we can own it. But if you're at the CIA or if you're at a high-profile family, you might have 3 or 4 or 5 or a dozen agents, but you don't have hundreds or thousands. So you have to be able to control that environment differently, and then plan for the unexpected. Yeah. So again, going back, a lot of training on skill sets that you do have to have, weapons training, self-defense training, because sometimes we do have to break, if you will, in a particular situation and take our principal to a safety situation or what we call a hard room or safe room. And that requires a choreographed movement if we can. Driving is always a big element of what we do. I sort of started the industry as a driver in Germany, and ever since then, driving has always been something. Even as a senior agent or a team leader, I had no problem getting behind the wheel and drive because I like to drive. I like to drive fast. There's something about that, and I think I'm pretty good at it. So that's a skill set that I've always enjoyed. If you have to get into a shootout, obviously you want good shooters, but if you have to get into a shootout, you probably screwed up somewhere before that happened. So, in the bigger operations, you have snipers and counter snipers. You have advanced teams. You have surveillance teams. You have a lot of components that go into protecting somebody. It just really depends on the level of protection and the level of necessity. The President of the United States is probably the highest level of protection probably in the world, and Secret Service does a good job of that, even though they've had episodes in the past where somebody got the best of them. So it keeps us on our toes.
So you mentioned a lot about controlling the environment, and I think that's another thing that makes Mitch Rapp and the writing of Vince Flynn work is he excels when he can't control the environment. He has that X factor, but in a majority of the scenes, there's more control than you'd think going on. You mentioned Thomas Stansfield, and then the director who would take over after him, Irene Kennedy. He's always got that team of people who are controlling those variables best they can. And so Rapp can deal with what happens on a whim. He'll be on the ground, but then he also has that team behind him. On most jobs, on your average job, would you have a team, like you mentioned, of 3 to 4 people? Would it depend on if it's a high-level government protection versus an individual contract? is there usually a team of people working together on most protection details?
It really depends on the individual and the circumstances. If it's a government official, for sure there's a team. If it's a very high net worth, high profile individual, there's more than likely a team. If we call them solo operators, there are still family members or maybe a CEO or executive that has maybe one close protection agent. That's not usually recommended. Sometimes we call a solo EP operator a witness because he might be able to see what happened right before his principal is shot or something bad happened, but he may not be able to counter that by himself or herself. So yeah, it definitely varies. But for a large government detail, a large high-profile family executive, you're going to have a team approach.
Okay, and I mean, I guess it's true, at least from my knowledge and what I think your average person would think is the best team out there, the Secret Service. Particularly their presidential protection detail. Is that really the highest caliber of protection that you can see anywhere in the world? I know you mentioned that. Are they really the highest it can go?
They're probably going to be the pinnacle for many reasons. Their budget is incredible. Yeah. The ability to hire and train is phenomenal. Their intelligence, case study, history is phenomenal. The fact that the president really has total control of the Secret Service, where they go, and if they can't, which very rarely they can't, they make the decisions not to take him there. Yeah. So when you look at the numbers, you look at the capability, you look at the history, you look at the budget, the weapon systems, the aircraft, the resources, it's hard to match something like the Secret Service. It's just hard. Now that's in terms of the program itself. But if you're looking at a low profile, what we consider low profile at the CIA, for example, I mean, a lot of our operations or a lot of our protected details are not around a high profile individual like the President of the United States. So if I can't bring in 200 or 300 agents, if I can't lock down an entire hotel, but I have to take a person under protection to the back streets of, you name the location, and protect him and maybe certain individuals he's meeting with because it's so critical, I got to be creative. Mm-hmm. And does the Secret Service do that well? Probably not. Yeah. They don't have to operate in that environment. So you have other teams and other organizations that train, have the resources, and they do that well. So it really, again, comes down to who you're protecting and what environment you're doing it in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So while we're talking about particularly government protection, as we're on that, a big theme in these books, besides just the badass, exciting things Mitch Rapp does out there to kill terrorists, another theme is the corruption in Washington. The self-serving politicians, the ones who are secretly pulling the strings, behind the public's eye and hiding things. In the world of intelligence or security protection, does politics play a role, or is it truly neutral in that you have a mission, you have a job, and or does politics play a role in some sort of contracts being cut or certain things not being given the amount of resources they deserve for purely political means? Does that get in the way?
I think without a doubt, it's hard to speak specifically, but to get in general, you could probably pull out scenarios like Benghazi. Did politics in any way play a role in the amount of protection that was provided for, for the ambassador and the consulate there? You get 50 people in a room, and 25 is going to say yes, and 25 is going to say no. Now, in terms of protecting an individual, let's take the director as an example, or some high-level official. No, politics really doesn't get involved in the level of protection we provide for them, or whether we do or we don't. Sometimes it can get a little messy. And I think I wrote about this actually in my book, so I could probably talk about that. I remember the deputy director traveling with a particular senator, and he, about halfway through the multiple country trip, started making decisions on where they were going to go next and changing the plans. Well, that messes us up a little bit because we have advanced teams in certain locations and we're making preparations. And if the senator is starting to make decisions on where he wants to go and take the deputy director, well, that's, could be some politics involved there. And I think in one particular site he wanted to go down range to a particular AO that was involved with a conflict, and we were not prepared to take our guy there. But he wanted to go down, and sometimes senators and staffs like to go get their 5 minutes of fame and photos and a war area and get back on the plane and head out. So to your point, sometimes politics can play a role in how we might protect an individual in that. And in this particular case, he fell under our protective umbrella because we're the team responsible for protecting the deputy director in this particular case. And when that happens, while our deputy director was our primary protectee, because he's a high-ranking senator, we're also going to include him in that umbrella. So if he's making decisions for political reasons, it can definitely cause some problems. So, for sure, I think books, probably capture it pretty good sometimes. It's a political field when you have 2 or 3 different powers that are, for whatever the reason, they're motivated. And yes, can that cause problems with protection? Sure, it can.
Yeah. Well, more on your personal experiences. You shared a little bit there. Is there a particular memorable moment, experience, or maybe a memorable individual that you had to protect that you're willing to talk about?
I do write about in books. I'll kind of stay true to what's in the book, and the reason I do that is the book had to be clear by the CIA. Mm-hmm. The CIA Publication Review Board reviews all employees' manuscripts, and that was about an 18-month process for me. So you try to stay within the lines and stay true to the purpose behind the PRB. So I'll stay close to the book. But I did mention my wake-up call in the field of close protection was actually in Germany when I was in the Air Force. And you may or may not be familiar with the case, but there was an attack by the Red Army faction when they assassinated Alfred Herrhausen. He was a high-level German banker. He had, he had maybe ties with a group called the Bilderbergs, and these sort of groups that have always had a conspiracy of sort of dominant control of the world. And you could write that into any book as well, any James Bond movie probably. But Herrhausen was known to tell the Red Army faction, "You're not going to kill me. You're not going to get me." And he was a very high-powered individual. He was close to the Chancellor of Germany at the time as well. So again, we're talking before the fall of the Vietnam War, or fall of the Berlin Wall. So our principal, which we found out just weeks prior, the German intelligence raided a safe house. And in the safe house, they found a list of individuals that the Red Army faction wanted to assassinate. Herrhausen was number 1, and our principal was on that list. So now it becomes real. Red Army faction has a very successful history of assassinating and attacking individuals. So it became very real for us. And we were on the road the day that Herrhausen was assassinated. He was assassinated close to his home in Frankfurt. We were a little further south, about an hour and a half. At that particular day, we were up close to where his house was, probably about 15 minutes, when we were on the road and we got the call from our ops center that Herrhausen had been attacked. His car actually hit basically an IED, if you will, and it killed him. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me that this job is for real.
Yeah.
And you don't always get to choose. In the case of IEDs, you don't always get to choose when you get to fight. That can take you out of the fight real quick, as we've seen for the last 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's a very unfair advantage that an enemy has, and we've had to, find ways to mitigate and work around that. But that's a hard one. A sniper's bullet, an explosion or a device parked near a location where they know you're going to travel. That makes the advanced team work a lot harder to try to find that. And in this particular case, they missed it. There was plenty of signals um, that the Red Army faction had been working this particular area, had been prepping it for this attack, and actually set a bicycle there for many, many days that nobody noticed. And then this one particular day, there was a satchel charge on the bicycle. And without going into a lot of details, there was an individual or small team there that let the first car go by. They ignited an IR beam, and when the principal's car broke that IR beam, explosion, took him out. So again, getting that phone call saying, "Hey, it's for real. Harryhausen has been assassinated. We know our guys on the list." It suddenly gets very, very real.
Yeah. I have a question. I'm a middle school geography teacher. So as you were talking, I'm hearing about an IED in Germany, which sounds like to me, if it's before the fall of the wall, in the 80s or so. What role does different geographies play to that advanced team and the planning? Because I would have never considered that you were setting up that story to end with a roadside bomb, an improvised device, where I would certainly expect that in the other examples. I know you mentioned Afghanistan, Iraq. So what role does the geography and the development status of where your protectee is headed, how does that play into your planning?
It plays a lot into it. And I think it goes back to any book or story. You have to know who your adversary is.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a principal who whether it's a terrorist organization that has made it known that they're after your guy, well, then kind of all bets are off. They may be able to use about anything, whether it's a plutonium stick, as you're walking down the sidewalk. If their goal is to kill your principal, well, there's a lot of ways that can happen.
Yeah.
It could be poison, it could be IED, it could be a vehicle attack, it could be a weapon attack. There's just, they have the advantage.
Yeah.
And they can get it wrong 99% of the time. Well, we only got to get it right once. So
it's that one.
That puts the pressure on a protected detail. You take this attack in Mexico with the chief of police. They've probably driven that route many, many times. When you're in a vehicle and your arrivals and departures, that's kind of where you're the most vulnerable. That's where you're most predicted. So to your point, geographics, yes, does play a role into it. That's why a lot of times we like to come in the back door of hotels and not the front door. We make sudden last-minute changes to change our routes. We may use dummy motorcades to throw off somebody. So there's a lot of different things that we have to think through. And at the end of the day, if you think the risk is that high, well, you may not travel anywhere. You may avoid that. So, it's in this particular case, you're probably talking. What we did know is terrorist organizations back then, even now, they tend to work together. They tend to support each other, and they learn from one another. And the IED was something new to the RAF, and we think they probably spent some time with the East German Stasi's, who were also spending time with Lebanese terrorist groups and Middle East terrorist groups that were a little more far advanced on using crude IED type of devices. Bringing it into a city, into a sort of a German community. Yeah, it doesn't, until it happened, kind of like a 9/11. Until it happens, you just don't think it'll happen.
Yeah. Well, as we start wrapping up here, what is it like designing a detail around celebrities? And we have a world today where celebrities are perhaps more persuasive to the public very often than politicians or academics or the quote smart people. We might get some not very bright people, but they have a whole lot of sway, particularly, among huge portions of the population. Everything they say, everywhere they make an appearance could really be a huge statement. So what is it like? And actually, Mitch Rapp, in case you haven't gotten to the most recent book, I recommend it if you do find some time. It's called Lethal Agent. Rapp's in charge of one of these, a pop star, a pop singer, a teenager, and he gets into a raucous, event. He actually has to hit the guy, because he's being an ass. But what is it like having to design a detail for celebrities and that cult of personality? Does that change anything?
Changes a lot. It's probably one of the most difficult, I think. That's not, as an EP, agent or somebody in the security field. There are some people who can make that transition from corporate to government to private sector. I'll be the first one to say I would not transition well to that kind of role. Maybe because I'm getting a little older. Maybe it's because I grew up in a defined role in terms of the military, the CIA, or corporate. I worked for a high-profile CEO for many years, but he was almost more like working for the director. He was very well-mannered, if you will. So to work for a pop star celebrity, yes. I mean, they obviously, some of them need it, either because of their personality or role, but it is different because you're working with so many people who are influencing them, and they have different, it could be, I mean, a celebrity figure is only as popular and based on his celebrity or her celebrity status. So it's photo shoots, it's arrivals, it's a big arrivals, and it's sort of the paparazzi is a double-edged sword for them. They don't like them unless they need them, and if they need their photos to get out there, then paparazzi is their best friend. But if they're on vacation with their family or kids, they don't want anybody taking their pictures. But it's hard to have it both ways. So when you're working with those kinds of characters, it's definitely even if you look at the industry, if you look at the bodyguard industry, you tend to see more of the bodyguard mentality, which is part of our executive protection skill set. But those individuals are trained differently because they're trained to work in that kind of environment where you have to not lose your patience when you have a lot of cameras around, when you have a lot of people. If I'm working for a protected detail for the president or CIA director, as an example, individuals like that get in our space, you're not going to like our response. So you have to have a different mentality. You have to have different tools. You have to have a proper demeanor. You got to know, when to sort of take authority and maybe pull your principal out of a situation, even though they feel they're comfortable, or they have representatives around them that's making them do things that probably they shouldn't be doing. It's for their own safety. So having that sort of authority and power, that previous discussion with these principals, we call it a principal brief. We're going to explain to them how we're going to do our job, things that we prefer they not do. And we kind of choreograph and talk about this prior to that. So that discussion is definitely going to be a lot different with a celebrity than it would be with an executive or somebody from the government. So it is different. I couldn't do it. I'll be honest. It's not my. It would not be my favorite type of principal.
That makes a lot of sense. And don't worry, because Mitch Rapp couldn't do it either. He got hired for the side job, and it was just some punk teenager, and he made a point very clearly that he wasn't having it. So I could see that being a whole different animal to work with. Well, thanks so much for coming on and shedding some light about this field, a field that very often is represented in the Mitch Rapp books. I hope you get to get back to reading some of them if you ever find some time. But to wrap up, how can the listeners find you and find your book, maybe online? You have a website, is that right?
I do. The book has a website. It's under theprotected.us. The book is on Amazon or any of the other online book outlets, if you will. But the easiest way, if you go to theprotected.us, it has links to the book, so it's an easy find there.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. And let me know if you ever get to read any Mitch Rapp books again.
Absolutely, Mike. I'm looking forward to that day to slowing down where I can spend more time reading those books. Absolutely.
It'll come.
The whole series of those books and the way that all the writers have captured the same story theme is just very powerful. Really, really nice job.
And actually, being in the industry from like 1 to 10, how accurate are they? Because I look at some books I read or some movies, and it's obviously a 0. It's not even hitting the mark. I get the sense, with no military experience, I still get the sense that how this is written in the research is somewhere in that high level, like 7, 8 or so out of 10 or higher of getting it right mostly, besides the fantastical elements. Am I off? Is it generally well researched, these kinds of stories?
Right. Vince did a really good job of that, and I think he started out that way. So whether you're a Brad Thor or Tom Clancy, these guys all do a tremendous amount of research.
Yep.
And when you're not from the organizations and you don't have to go through the review process, and you have a little more liberty to be very close to the truth, those writers who have done the right research, and I can guarantee you, Vince or Kyle, these guys all have a short list of people they sit down and have drinks with, and make trips and see operations, and have sort of really in-depth conversations. Their writing is going to be much more accurate, and you can tell that in the book. So no, you're right. His books are, you're probably up there in the 7 to 8 area.
It's interesting. I learned even the reverse about this. I heard that particularly post 9/11, there was big talk that we weren't being creative enough in how we analyzed threats and categorized them. And so I heard there were a team of fiction writers, and I don't know exactly who was brought in, but I wouldn't be surprised if a Vince or a Brad Thor or even, Tom Clancy, to have that more creative edge to kind of propose solutions that are outside the box. So it's kind of like the two can complement each other. Fiction can often enhance the imagination. And as we know, our enemy has quite an imagination with some of the things they plan and do. So maybe not a bad idea for authors and the Hollywood type to kind of do a give and take with the professionals in the field.
100%. And I think that does occur, because I know organizations within the military and the government are always looking to draft events that may occur. And if they may occur, it means you have to use imagination to come up with that storyline. So for sure, there's probably some really, really great books sitting in the archives of the Defense Department or CIA that you could take out that never really happened, but it was a story written to be prepared for. That could be a good book. And actually, the CIA kind of did that back in the 90s, when they had a very senior officer by the name of Chase Brandon. What a great name is that? I think it was actually under George Tenet, assigned Chase to be Hollywood's representative.
Oh, wow.
Help them bring some reality to their movies and kind of not make every CIA movie about a bad guy.
Yeah.
Bring some good stuff to it. And I think Brandon's first series that he was an advisor on was Alias.
Oh, okay.
And so that had a lot of sort of CIA cracked the door open a little bit for that series. And then I think you saw other movies and series follow that time period in the late 90s, early 2000, using that sort of conduit between the CIA and different writers and different movies to bring a little more realism to the topics. So, yeah, you're right.
Well, that's great to hear. Again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you finding the time to come on. And to our listeners, check out theprotected.us and look at some of Michael's work in the field of security. Thanks so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right. We hope you enjoyed that interview with Mike. And so next time, we'll be coming at you with our first part of Executive Power, breaking down the first half of the book. So look out for that. Read up if you want to. We want to take this time to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., and our special agents, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Roman, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, and Jeff. Please subscribe, rate, and review us using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at mitrappod.com or using our Twitter handle at mitrappod. And what do we have to do, Mike?
We should just let Mitch be Mitch.
Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.